Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. In Genoa City, heartbreak never stayed quiet for long. It echoed through boardrooms, bars and living rooms, slipping into every conversation whether people wanted it there or not. And lately, one name kept floating through the whispers more than most: Billy Abbott. The air still felt heavy after his latest fallout with Sally Spectra. Their breakup hadn't been a dramatic explosion in public, no screaming scene in the middle of society or crimson lights. Instead, it had been quieter, colder, and somehow more final, the kind of ending that left unfinished emotions hanging in the background like a storm that never fully passed. Billy sat alone at the bar, swirling his drink without actually tasting it. His mind replayed every conversation he'd had with Sally over the last few months: the hope, the tension, the promises, and ultimately the disappointment. He had tried, or at least he had convinced himself that he had, but Billy Abbott had a pattern, and deep down he knew it better than anyone else. He always believed he was on the verge of turning things around. And then somehow everything unraveled again. Across town, Sally paced her hotel suite, arms folded tightly as if holding herself together. She had meant what she said. She was done, completely done. At least that's what she kept repeating to herself. Because if she stopped saying it, she might start remembering the way Billy looked at her when he was vulnerable, the way he listened when he wasn't spiraling, the way he made her laugh at the exact wrong moments. "He's not changing," she whispered to herself, as though saying it aloud would make it more real. "He never does." Sally knew the cycle. Billy would promise growth, convince everyone he was stable, focused, different. Then something would trigger him: business pressure, family conflict, or his own inner chaos, and suddenly he'd be spinning out again, dragging everyone emotionally close to him along for the ride. She refused to be collateral damage again. Meanwhile, at the Newman ranch, Victoria Newman was in no mood to revisit old history. When Billy's name came up during a tense business discussion, her expression hardened instantly. "Billy made his choices," Victoria said coolly, "and now he can live with the consequences." Nikki exchanged a glance with Victor, silently acknowledging the unspoken truth. Victoria's anger wasn't just professional, it was personal, deeply personal. Billy had hurt her too many times for forgiveness to come easily. Chelsea Lawson, on the other hand, was far less diplomatic when his name surfaced during a conversation with Adam. "Billy," she scoffed, "he's exactly the same man he's always been: charming when he wants to be, reckless when it counts, and completely unpredictable." Adam smirked slightly but didn't argue. Because even he knew that description wasn't wrong. Back at Society, the late-night crowd buzzed softly, the low music creating the perfect backdrop for quiet conversations and emotional realizations. Billy eventually found himself there instead of the bar, as if his feet had led him somewhere more public to avoid being alone with his thoughts. That's when he saw her. Sienna backcall. She wasn't looking for him. In fact, she looked completely absorbed in her phone, her expression thoughtful, almost conflicted. She had that kind of presence: calm but sharp, composed but intriguing. Billy didn't approach right away, he simply noticed. And that alone was unusual for him. Across the room, Noah Newman spotted Sienna too, his face lighting up as he made his way toward her with hopeful energy that bordered on naive optimism. "Sienna," Noah said warmly, sliding into the seat across from her. She looked up and smiled politely, though something in her eyes suggested uncertainty rather than excitement. "Noah, you're persistent," she said lightly. He laughed. "Is that a bad thing?" "Depends on the situation," she replied, tilting her head slightly. Their conversation flowed, but it wasn't effortless. Noah's enthusiasm felt genuine, but there was an imbalance, like he was chasing something he believed in more than she did. From a distance, Billy watched the interaction without meaning to. He didn't know why he was observing them. Maybe it was boredom, maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was the strange pull of recognizing another person who looked slightly out of place in a room full of certainty. Later that evening, fate, or Genoa City's usual habit of orchestrating unexpected encounters, stepped in. Sienna moved toward the bar after Noah left to take a call. Billy happened to be standing there, lost in thought. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Sienna glanced sideways and noticed him. "You look like a man who's either solving a problem or avoiding one," she said casually. Billy blinked, surprised, then let out a small laugh. "Can't it be both?" That earned a genuine smile from her. "Fair enough." There was no instant flirtation, no dramatic spark, just conversation, real conversation. And that alone felt different. They talked about nothing and everything: the city, business stress, second chances, and how people rarely saw the full story behind public mistakes. Sienna didn't seem impressed by his name or reputation, she simply treated him like a person. That was rare. Very rare. As the minutes passed, Billy found himself more relaxed than he had been in weeks. No expectations, no emotional baggage being thrown at him, no one reminding him of his past failures. Just a clean slate. Across the room, Noah returned and stopped dead when he saw Billy and Sienna talking, laughing quietly like they had known each other longer than they actually had. A flicker of tension crossed Noah's face. Because suddenly the situation didn't feel as simple as it once had. And for the first time, Billy Abbott wasn't chasing chaos. Chaos might be quietly finding him instead. By the time the night ended, Sienna stood to leave, slipping her phone into her bag. "It was nice talking to you, Billy," she said sincerely. He nodded, likewise, unexpectedly nice. As she walked away, Billy leaned back slightly, staring into his untouched drink. He didn't know what this was. He didn't even know if it meant anything. But for the first time since his breakup with Sally, he didn't feel like he was spiraling. And that alone was dangerous. Because in Genoa City, the moment Billy Abbott started feeling stable, that was usually when everything began to change. Morning in Genoa City brought with it the illusion of normalcy, but beneath the polished routines and business meetings, emotional undercurrents were already shifting. News traveled fast in this town, not always through headlines, but through glances, whispers, and carefully worded conversations. By the time Billy walked into Chancellor, a few people had already heard he'd been seen talking with Sienna Bacall the night before. Not flirting. Not causing a scene. Just talking. And somehow that alone made it more interesting. Lily Winters raised an eyebrow when she heard the tidbit from a passing employee. She didn't react loudly, but internally she was already analyzing what it could mean. Billy forming a connection with someone new could either stabilize him or send him into a completely different emotional spiral. Meanwhile, Sally sat at Crimson Lights, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly as Chloe Mitchell watched her closely. "You're overthinking," Chloe said bluntly. "I'm not," Sally replied instantly. "You are," Chloe countered. "You broke up with Billy, that was your decision, a smart one." Sally's jaw tightened slightly, it was the only decision. But Chloe wasn't fooled, she knew that tone. She had heard it before, the one that sounded confident but carried traces of unresolved emotion. "What if he moves on?" Chloe asked carefully. Sally froze for half a second. Then she scoffed, "Billy always moves on, that's kind of his thing." Yet the idea lingered longer than she wanted to admit. Because despite everything there was still love there, complicated, messy, unfinished love. Elsewhere, Noah approached Sienna near the park, his usual warmth mixed with a subtle edge he couldn't quite hide. "You and Billy seemed comfortable last night," he said. Sienna crossed her arms lightly. "We talked, that's all." Noah nodded, but the unease remained. He's not exactly known for simple conversations. "And you are," she replied calmly. That stopped him. Sienna wasn't dismissive, but she also wasn't naive. She saw people clearly, their strengths, their flaws, and the emotional baggage they carried into every interaction. And Billy Abbott carried plenty. Later that day, Billy and Sienna crossed paths again at Society, completely by coincidence, or at least that's what they both pretended. "You again," she said with a faint smile. "Either fate or small-town geography," Billy replied. This time the conversation was deeper. More honest. He admitted things he rarely said out loud, how exhausting it was to constantly try to reinvent himself, how people expected him to fail even when he genuinely wanted to succeed, and how losing Sally hurt more than he was willing to show publicly. Sienna listened without interrupting. No judgment. No pity. Just understanding. "You know," she said after a pause, "sometimes the problem is that people don't believe you can change. It's that they've seen the pattern too many times." Billy didn't argue. Because she wasn't wrong. Across town, Victoria heard the same rumor and immediately dismissed it with a cold shake of her head. Billy and someone new, she muttered. Let's see how long that lasts. Chelsea's reaction wasn't much kinder. He doesn't need a new woman, she said firmly. He needs to fix himself first. But Genoa City rarely waited for people to fix themselves before throwing them into new emotional entanglements. That evening, Sally found herself scrolling through social media, accidentally stumbling upon a photo someone had posted from society the night before. Billy, laughing, relaxed, with Sienna. Her chest tightened unexpectedly. Not because she wanted him back. Not because she regretted the breakup. But because part of her had assumed he'd be miserable longer. And seeing him look okay, that strung more than she expected. Back at society, Billy and Sienna's dynamic continued to evolve, not with dramatic declarations but with small, meaningful moments. Shared jokes, honest conversations, mutual curiosity. It wasn't explosive. It was subtle. And that subtlety made it far more dangerous. Because for the first time in a long time, Billy wasn't chasing someone from his past. He was getting to know someone who saw him without the weight of history. A clean slate. A fresh dynamic. And in a city built on complicated relationships, that kind of connection could change everything. Still, tension lingered. Noah wasn't blind. Sally wasn't unaffected. And Billy himself didn't fully trust his own stability. As he stood alone later that night, watching the city lights flicker beyond the windows, one thought quietly surfaced in his mind. Maybe this wasn't about replacing Sally. Maybe this wasn't about romance at all. Maybe this was about the possibility of becoming someone different with someone who didn't already expect him to fail. But in Genoa City, unexpected romantic news always came with consequences. And if Billy Abbott truly was stepping into a new emotional chapter with Sienna Bacall, then heartbreak, jealousy and temptation were never far behind. Because love in Genoa City was never simple. And Billy's story was far from over.